tax exemption for some churches or all churches. And we'll start with Vivian.
I am not at this time in favor of that. I think we're doing good. We're doing good. Again, the city is not in dire straits. If you look across America and the shape that small towns and cities are in, they're in horrible, horrible shape. We are not. We are doing good, and we should be proud of that. There's a lot of hard work that's gone into this. You can, Jeff Johnson, you can thank Jerry Clearworth for always knowing which rock to overturn. You can, thank everyone who comes to the meetings, who participates, and everyone else. Our city's doing just fine. I don't think we need to go there.
Thank you very much. Now we go to Terry.
Well, that's a tough one because it is state law and it is a nonprofit exemption, and I know that taxes have to be fair and equitable. And I appreciate what you're saying because we have some really big nonprofits in this community that aren't paying property taxes on some really nice big pieces of property. So, but I wouldn't be in favor of supporting anything that would affect churches at this time. Thanks.
Thank you. And Frank?
Well, that's a question I leave to my conscience commission to look into those matters that I don't understand clearly. A cross-section of individuals in this community.
Thank you. And Joe, you get to wrap up.
Okay, on the issue of nonprofits, you have to understand what the nonprofit tax laws are about to begin with. The theory between tax exemption is that the party that is tax exempt is providing something to the community that the government does not support, does not provide. The whole discussion here tonight has been largely, what you might say in philosophical terms, materialistic. We're talking about revenue and expense. We're not talking about quality of life or community or spirituality or any of the other intangibles that make up the rest of a society. And that, in theory, is why the churches, by and large, have a tax exemption. There is a difference between those and the plethora of nonprofits that have been created in the last 40 years that we should be well aware of. And those nonprofits are also regulated by federal law. They're allowed to come into existence because they provide a service not provided by government. Where you have a problem is when the government exempts them from taxation on the properties they hold or subsidizes them. And that's the difficulty, because then the whole theory of nonprofit structure stops working. We have a number of nonprofits that receive funding from government here. The other issue we might look at, and this is probably a broader statewide issue, would be looking at Title 29, the exemptions for state-owned corporations and state property and public property. We have a riverbed down here that is completely filled up with nonprofit organizations because they don't pay taxes.
Thank you. And I wasn't going to take any more questions. This is a simple yes or no. We're just running out of time.
Yeah, pretty quick.
Okay, make it quick.
Thanks. I was just wondering how much spine HB would show in contract negotiations. For instance, this past winter, I didn't rent a snowplow one time, and yet we had 8-9 people at Public Works all winter long, and I'm wondering if they were patching potholes, if there was snow plowing. But when I hear the answer from the mayor that there's 250 miles in the city that they have to take care of, and I'm thinking to myself, boy, that's just half the drive to Anchorage. I can do that in about 4 hours, so I don't know what they're talking about. I'm wondering if, you think that the police, fire, and public works should be kind of at the median wage of what the average Fairbankson is, or if you think that they should be supremely paid, or if you think that they should have gold-plated retirements and health care, or if you think that how strong you'd be in contract negotiations with each of those departments.
Okay, and we start with Terry for that question.
Man, this is the second time because it's really hugely complex issues here to start out with. My limited knowledge of contract negotiations is that sometimes when sometimes we're stuck with contracts, and I think Vivian, you mentioned that with reviewing the firemen's contracts. I mean, people negotiated these years ago, and we're paying for them right now. And so I think that city employees should make a good livable wage. I have seen over the years with my husband's a union employee, and I have seen our benefits decrease over the years. We're paying more for health care than we paid before. We used to have great dental coverage and all that's, you know, decreased over the years. I'm not well versed enough in what the city's contracts are to see if they've, you know, taken concessions over the years. But certainly I think that we need to look at the times that we're living in. And I, you know, from where I sit in the nonprofit sector, health insurance is something that everybody's struggling with and everybody's paying more for. So certainly we need to have our city contracts match what's happening in our country and in our community.
Thank you very much, Frank.
As far as contract negotiations, bargaining units, that's a big lion to chew on. Once again, I would ask my conscience commission to look into those matters.
Thank you, Frank. We go to Joe Fields.
When you're managing something, you know, in the private sector, when you look at unionization, you generally look at it from the private sector that if this group can manage your employees at a cost that is acceptable to you, then you go for that. And if it becomes unacceptable to you as the person trying to make a profit, you then step away from it and move back. Here we have ongoing contracts and we have negotiations. I'm not privy to what they are, but I think you have to also build a team loyalty inside the workforce. If you want to have your workforce become completely ineffective, then you might take some action to force them into a position where they have to have a work slowdown or something of that nature, which might affect the public more adversely. But basically, you have as strong a negotiation as you can with the interest of who's paying for this. The taxpayers are paying for it, so they have a prime seat at the table, and that's who you represent. But you're working with your own labor force, and so you have to be fair with them too. You have to, if you make a deal, you got to keep the deal, and then there's a time limit on that. When the time limit runs out, you start making a new deal. And so I don't know where we're at in that cycle of processes, but it'll be tough negotiations if it's going to be hurting the people.
Thank you. And go to Vivian.
It is a very complex question. There have been